I'm Billy S, welcome back to the channel. Today we're continuing my ranking of the Hollow Knight bosses from worst to best. Did you miss part 1 where we tackled bosses 47 through 31? Click the link at the top of the description and go catch up. We'll be waiting for you, don't worry. So without further ado, all 47 Hollow Knight bosses ranked, part 2. I'm gonna be honest, when I developed this list, there was one boss I was expecting to land near the bottom that has, to my surprise, clawed its way out of part 1 and into part 2. Congratulations to number 30, Umu. The boss of the Teacher's Archives, Umu is an abnormally large Uma that defends Monomon's chambers from outsiders. While lost to the infection, its Dreamnail dialogue suggests that it does have some intelligence. Do not sacrifice light for Monomon. It remembers its duty and does it well, to the point where when we arrive to claim the Dreamer, we're unable to harm this large jellyfish. It has 2 attacks it can use, Burst, which creates a small series of lightning bursts around the arena, and you simply have to stand in an area without one to avoid the damage, and Chase, which creates continuous series of lightning bolts around the knight's position, forcing you to keep moving to survive. With the way the platforms in the arena are placed, you have to have full confidence in your movement tools to have success here, though you can use the acid as a viable escape tool if you have Isma's Tear as well. What I love is the lore significance of this boss, as Quirrell, the best character in the game, don't at me, appears to support you, slicing open Umu's membrane so you can deliver the finishing blows. This is a big moment for Quirrell, as he likely cares for the creatures of the Archives thanks to his past working for Monomon. So taking out Umu could be seen as a betrayal on his part. My main issue with the fight though is how drawn out it can be. Quirrell's attacks are spaced out heavily, and Umu is only weak for a short period of time, so unless you have a way to drastically damage the jellyfish, you could be at this fight for at least 5 minutes or more. But then we get to the Godhome variation, where due to the lack of Quirrell, you instead have to use explosive Umas to shatter the membrane. And with a fully upgraded kit, Umu can be killed with just 7 to 10 hits of a fully upgraded nail and fragile strength equipped. It's a very predictable fight, with the only issue being the RNG of where the 2 summoned Umas will rise up from. So while there are certainly aspects of Umu I find frustrating, it's one of the better late game bosses from a lore significance. Watcher Knights, take note. Next up on our list, we've got a shorter entry because we've technically already discussed this boss before, and its moveset remains relatively unchanged. Give it up for number 29, the Enraged Guardian of the Crystal Peak. This is the second battle with the Crystal Guardian, found only by using the Monarch wings to soar up to its arena above the bench where you fought him the first time. And as I alluded to, the battle's exactly the same. You still have to dodge its laser beam, you still have to dodge its sky beams, and you still have to avoid its much faster hops. It's just a more aggressive version of the previous boss. I think the lasers are slightly larger, but that could also just be me assuming because every attack from this boss does 2 masks worth of damage. It's actually quite funny, given the 2 masks of damage is usually reserved for endgame bosses with a ton of significance, such as the Radiants, Nightmare King Grim, or the Traitor Lord. So I love the idea that this dude is just so upset that he lost earlier that he's gone full-blown tantrum. For me, this is a boss that is very simple to defeat, but also very easy to slip up against. The slightest lapse in concentration from feeling sure you're going to win, and you might find yourself jumping a hair too late to avoid a laser. Or maybe it'll just hop on top of you with aggressive speed and you won't be able to avoid the contact damage. Thank goodness in the Pantheons it's at the start of a split and not the end, because once mastered it serves as a great appetizer boss, and the fact you can utilize your past knowledge to still do well against it is really cool. It's not the best boss in the game to use that trope, as its moveset is just a little too simple for my tastes, but I definitely enjoy every fight I have with the Enraged Guardian, and putting it down for good nets you a Mask Shard. Nice. How crazy is it that we're only at number 28 on this list, and I'm already like, I love this boss is amazing, we stan. I had to really nitpick for most of this ranking series, but at number 28, we have the Soul Master. The leader of the Soul Sanctum, he used the power of Soul to stave off the infection, searching for immortality as he hoarded more and more soul with the people of Hallownest as his victims. He had to get the soul from somewhere after all. When we arrive, the Soul Master has long been driven to insanity alongside his followers, and it's up to us to strip him of the power he stole. And in the end, he never learns, ultimately believing in his own ideals to his bitter, deluded grave. As a fight, I think it's an extremely solid magic battle for the point in the game he's fought. He has a surprisingly large repertoire of moves, from a desolate dive slam that creates shockwaves upon impact, to the fake-out version where he winds up, then teleports before releasing said attack, hoping to catch the player off guard. He can dash across the screen, giving the player a chance to pogo him for damage. He has an orb attack where he fires a soul orb that homes in on the knight, the only way to avoid it being to let the attack hit the floor, and he combos this attack with his teleport, warping to different parts of the arena to fire at you from. It's pretty slow in his Soul Master form, but dangerous to an unprepared new player. Lastly, he has his clock ability, where he crosses the screen with 4 orbs rotating either clockwise or anti-clockwise depending on which way he's going. This is a fun attack to avoid, it's easy to get hits in, and you can always get a safe heal from the center of the arena after he passes by, as those floating orbs will never touch the center. Defeating him can be a bit of a marathon, not a sprint, as his health pool is large, and his teleporting makes it hard to get consistent hits in. But do enough damage and you'll trigger his fake-out death animation before he desolate dives you into a darkened room filled with the corpses of those sacrificed for his experiments. This last phase is a big surprise, but dodging his dives and hitting him when he appears while avoiding the orbs he summons wins you the day. It's a fully formed fight and one of the toughest of the early game, fully deserving of recognition, but I just prefer fights with better pacing. I think his health is a tad bit too high, and the price for failure in this fight is a very lengthy boss run back. One of the more interesting aspects of Hollow Knight was its foray into alternate variants for bosses. We've already seen this with the Crystal Guardian, but until the DLCs were added, we only had a handful of extra fights set in the main game, and these were dream variants of early game bosses. The first of which on my list is number 27, the Failed Champion. Found by dream nailing the corpse of the False Knight Maggot found in a hidden room above his boss arena, you're able to fight a truly devastating variation of the False Knight boss that goes above and beyond to do some serious damage. Failed Champion takes the moveset of its predecessor and amps up the speed, forcing you to react immediately to avoid his attacks. His leaping bludgeon height is lower, and the attack comes out much faster, so it's easy to get hit if you're not prepared. And any contact or weapon damage from this boss causes 2 masks of health loss. On top of this, flaming barrels will fall from the sky anytime the Failed Champion slams his weapon down, so there's even more projectiles to keep an eye on. His slams with the shockwaves come out faster, but the shockwaves and barrels only do 1 mask of damage, so they're less dangerous. The challenge is just getting used to Failed Champion's rhythm, because once you've managed that, the battle is mostly won. It's the same song and dance as the original fight, and if you need soul, you can dream nail his armor when he staggers for a refill. For me, I can handle his rhythm 90% of the time, then there's the 10% where I stumble initially and can't get the momentum back on my side, and it just so happens to be at the end of the Pantheon of Hallownest, where he's the 4th to last boss of the entire run. Beyond that, I just think the other dream variants have a bit more variety to their movesets that make them more fun to fight. Failed Champion is a rest stop to get a soul refill via the Dream Nail before Nightmare King Grim, and in the main campaign, he's just a fun extra fight you can retry for an extra percentage. Very middle of the road, and that's okay. If you came to me back in 2017, I'd have put my next boss towards the very bottom of the pack, and justifiably so. But it's 2023, baby, and I'm coming out as a lover of number 26, Nosk. While not my favorite boss in the game, far from it, Nosk does have my favorite build-up. You've been traversing the claustrophobic pits of Deepness to even reach Nosk's area of the map, and you manage to find a breakable wall where behind sits a grub. You think, nice, I've saved this grub, time to head back. But then another breakable wall catches your eye. A tunnel stretches out before you, and as you walk, you notice a figure looming out of sight. A figure that looks exactly like you? So you follow it, spotting it multiple times, until you reach a large hallway where, as you progress, sticky webs appear behind you. And as you enter the boss arena, you're greeted with the corpses of various bugs, some small, some surprisingly large, all strung up by this creature. It starts off like you, but then the body horror begins, the shriek emanates, and Nosk transforms into a spider-like creature that scrabbles along the floor with disgusting sound effects. I actually find Nosk quite hard to fight earlier on in a playthrough, which is exactly what I did this time round. I hadn't even gotten to the Monarch wings yet, but I really wanted the challenge. When the game first launched, Nosk only had 2 abilities, running across the arena and jumping at the player. It was frenetic and aggressive, but you could so easily pogo over the boss or hug the sides of the central platform where the boss's hitbox would never touch that you never had any issues here. So when the first of the DLCs came out, Nosk was reworked to have 2 new attacks that, in my opinion, change up their fight enough to make them a genuine threat. An eruption attack, where Nosk takes to the center of the arena and launches globules of infection. Most of the time you can use those aforementioned safe spots to avoid the eruption attack, but not always. And then there's the rain attack, the bane of my existence for some reason, as Nosk launches up into the ceiling and begins crawling after the night. Infection blobs will slowly drop from the sky, telling you where Nosk is as they home in on the player. Most of the time I can avoid this attack fine, but there are instances where I accidentally get cornered waiting too long to make a move. With these 2 additions to the base moveset, Nosk is more threatening, and while still not a terribly hard boss, it was actually one of the bosses I died the most to on this recorded run, so if that's not a good indication of challenge and quality, I don't know what is. It's been a while since our last Warrior Dream, so how about for the next 2 entries we knock some out, yeah? Next up, number 25, Elder Who? Oh, his name is Elder Who, gotcha. This traveling sage, found in the upper reaches of the fungal wastes, made the one mistake that you shouldn't make while traveling there. Don't fuck with the Mantis tribe. Convinced they were afflicted with the plague due to his own infected mind, he attempted to cleanse them, only to find himself slain in return. A grave was erected above the gates of the City of Tears, which is where we find him in-game, and it's up to us to defeat him and show him the truth of his actions, revealing his own mind's affliction and putting his spirit to rest. In regards to his fight, it's not hard, I'll be honest, but I really love his aesthetic and vibe. He fights with these rings that adorn his arms. I used to think they were coins, slamming them down towards the ground while he floats high above. He has 2 distinct moves he can use, the first being Ring Curtain, where he'll vanish briefly and summon a curtain of rings that slam down, beginning at the edge of the arena before making their way to the center. Just dash under them at the right time and you're golden, it's a perfect time to heal. His other move is his Ring Slam, where he'll summon rows of rings in midair, which will generally have a safe spot or 2 you can dash to avoid. These rings all fall simultaneously though, making them hard to dodge, unless you have the Shade Cloak. The Shade Cloak breaks this fight, as you can dash through each of his attacks, and by the time his next is ready to come out, your Shade Cloak will have already regenerated. This means there's literally no danger posed to the player, unless you get greedy with attacking Elder Hu and forgetting to press the dash button during an attack. But I don't mind this. You have to go really far out of your way to get the Shade Cloak, and you can face Elder Hu from much earlier in the game, so upgrading your kit to have an easier time is par for the course in Metroidvanias. What I do mind is Elder Hu's teleporting. You can get lucky and have him stay in the same spot for a while, or he might teleport away after every attack. And if he chains together multiple ring curtains, it can get tedious having to wait for the attack to end so he can reappear, hit him once, only for him to vanish again and reuse that same attack. It's annoying, but at least he doesn't have a ton of health, so he will go down relatively easily. I did say in the last entry there'd be multiple warrior dreams to cover, so let's knock out number 24, Galleon. Found in a hidden area in Upper Deep Nest, this warrior travelled here to become even stronger so that he may prove his worth to the Pale King. But in his hubris, he failed to account for the ancient leopard, the residents of Deep Nest, and was slain. When you find him, he's convinced he's still alive, and even after besting him in battle, he never realizes the truth. Perhaps it's for the best that a single-minded individual such as he never faced the harsh truths before he's sucked into the Dream Nail. It's also worth quickly noting that there is a lifeblood cocoon nearby, so if you need some extra hits for the fight, they are available. Galleon utilizes a series of scythes. The first is his main weapon, which spins around independently of the boss, and will bounce along the ground, attempting to hit the knight's last known location. Staying low and keeping to the floor is your best bet here, as you can dash through the scythe when it gets too close, and it's very easy to bait it. At 70% health and 40% health, Galleon will spawn in 2 Dream Scythes, smaller variations of the same attack, but who move slower and more independently of the main scythe. It may seem like a lot in theory, but in practice, I find it quite easy to avoid his attacks. Galleon, meanwhile, has a glaring weakness that, honestly, all of the warrior dreams have. The humble upward slash, as well as the Abyss Shriek spell for this fight specifically. These are powerful because, unlike other warrior dreams, Galleon doesn't have a large knockback when hit with attacks. He often stays in place, meaning upward slashes won't push him away from the player, and Abyss Shrieks will have all of their attacks hit, which makes him very simple to melt if you have Fragile Strength equipped, or ranged charms like Long Nail and Markham Pride combined with Quick Slash. In other words, once you're comfortable with how his scythes work, of which the only real dangerous one is the main spinning scythe, you've already won the fight. They could have made him harder by giving him more knockback like the other warrior dreams, but this would arguably have made his fight less enjoyable and more tedious as a result, so I respect the decision they went with. A solid battle that encourages a quick finish, lest the scythes build up and take you out in the long game. Next up, we have a boss that was not only a good time to fight, giving the same style of jolly vibes you get from Dung Defender, but was also a boss that completely revitalized an area that sorely needed a conclusion. At number 23, we have the Hive Knight, boss of the Hive. For newer fans, you may not know this, but the Hive was originally a fairly desolate area. While the platforming and enemies remained relatively the same, the aesthetics were rather bland, and it made the bees feel like this primitive species. You'd hop in, collect the collectibles, get out, and wouldn't really think about the area afterwards. Then the Lifeblood update came out and breathed new life into the Hive. I'll get into this aspect of the level more in my area ranking video later in the month, but on top of the visual overhaul, they added a brand new boss. The Hive Knight is tragic, as are all the bees. They've fallen to infection, and their corrupted hive mind has them guarding the corpse of their queen, unable to accept her death. So you must slay the Hive Knight and relieve this tribe of their burden. What I love about the Hive Knight is that being the boss of a secret area and being developed as DLC meant they could give him a pretty fun moveset that takes advantage of endgame abilities. His lunge and surprise slash attacks can be shadow dashed through, or pogoed if you don't have that power. They come out fast, meaning your reaction speeds have to be on point. He has a Honey Spikes ability, where he summons 3 honey orbs with spikes that explode in 8 different directions, and you've got to position correctly to avoid the attack. Though I found that due to Hive Knight's light weight, it's easy to just wail on him during this attack, and as you stick close to him, you're less likely to get hit by said spikes. His greatest strength though is his Swarm Release attack, where he launches a series of hivelings into the air, which then fly down homing towards the knight. Having to avoid these creatures while also dodging the Hive Knight's attacks is a difficult balancing act, but a welcome one. If you have a fully upgraded Nail, this fight might be over quicker than you'd like, but facing him earlier in the game can provide a unique challenge, the only downside being the absolutely awful boss run back. You have to go through the whole hive to reach him again, and while I enjoy exploring this area, it's way too tedious to get past all the bees. We're tackling the evolved form of a boss we've already mentioned today, as at number 22, we have the Soul Tyrant. Accessible by dream nailing the Soul Master's corpse, this dream fight allows us a battle with a stronger form of this boss, and just like the failed champion, we're dealing with a much faster moveset. I already covered his lore in his previous entry, as well as most of his moves, so I'll just note the differences. In his clock attack, he now summons 6 orbs around him when he crosses the screen, but the concept is still the same. Get hits in where you can, use your Shade Cloak to avoid damage, and use the center of the arena to heal. The other notable change is his slam attack, which provides faster and taller shockwaves the player has to avoid. Everything else is the same as it was prior, but sped up. And if you thought the original fight was an endurance test, prepare to cry, my friends. I really enjoy the difficulty of the Soul Tyrant as you're learning his moveset, because the different attack timings really force you to adapt on the fly, and you can't put a foot wrong lest you take a shockwave or a soul orb to the face. But on the other hand, he teleports far more often and leaves you with less windows of opportunity to do damage. The marathon that was the first fight becomes a cross-country 90-day hike, and it's very easy to get greedy due to wanting the fight to be over, or make mistakes due to how long the fight lasts. Phase 2 is just a non-stop barrage of danger. The Desolate Dives are as easy to avoid as normal with the right timing, but once he's summoning orbs, you have to whittle him down quickly. Without Quick Slash or an Abyss Shriek, you'll likely be doing a second round of Desolate Dives with the Soul Tyrant to finish him off. I just wish he wasn't placed right at the start of the final split in the Pantheon of Hallownest, as I have to play his fight perfectly to have any hope against Markov straight after. Or how about Pantheon 4, where he's the fight before Pure Vessel? Pure evil if I do say so myself. I enjoy the fight, it makes me think, I've got it down. I just prefer fighting other bosses. Barely missing out on our top 20, we have a boss that is the poster child for difficult until you get into the rhythm. At number 1, we have the Traitor Lord. This is a boss that may seem overwhelming and fast-paced on your initial fight, but once you get the chance to practice either in the Queen's Gardens or at Godhome, you'll realize there's a very specific flow to this battle that makes it, well, easy. But not in the anyone can do this sense, more in the you're good enough at the game you can recognize this pattern sense. The Traitor Lord led a faction of the Mantis tribe who broke away from those in the Fungal Wastes to form their own clan, taking the infection inside and becoming stronger for it. But they made the mistake of attempting to banish a white lady from her vacation home and ultimately fell to base instincts. This fight was originally much easier in the base game, as the Traitor Lord only had 2 attacks. His dash, where he slices towards you, and his dive, where he leaps into the air and dives diagonally towards you. The former attack can be shadow dashed through with the right timing, while the latter attack just requires you to walk forward slightly. All the while, these attacks give you the openings you need to attack the Traitor Lord in turn. Hilariously easy, so in the Lifeblood update, the Traitor Lord was given 2 new attacks. The Dancing Glaive, which he'll only use if you're too far away from him in the arena, where he'll launch a pair of infected wind scythes that travel in different cosine wave patterns. Or he'll use the Ground Pound, where he'll begin slamming the ground, summoning a shockwave that covers the arena floor to ceiling, and you have to shadow dash through it to avoid damage. and of these attacks, everything except the Dancing Glaive does 2 masks of damage. It's brutal when you're not in the rhythm. At least in your first fight, you might have Cloth to help you if you followed her questline, as she'll slay the mantises that appear before the Mantis Lord drops down and will deliver the final blow after being fatally impaled by the boss. It's tragic, but it's also what Cloth wanted. In the Pantheons, however, it's up to you and only you to figure out the timing and realize that each attack is paced just far enough to let your Shadow Dash recharge. And with that knowledge, you can do Traitor Lord hitless very easy. A great fight after its buff that, while many expert players now find boring, I always find exhilarating to face. I don't know whether this is going to be a controversial take or not, but I'm more than willing to stand by it. At number 20, we have Hornet Sentinel, the second fight with Hornet at the Kingdom's Edge, and my hot take is that I personally enjoy her first fight more. A lot more. This is a clear instance of difficulty not being the main metric I use to judge which bosses I enjoy, and for what it's worth, I think Hornet Sentinel is a fantastic fight all of its own. She uses all her abilities from her first fight, her lunge, her aerial lunge, her needle throw, her leap, her run, and her Gossamer Storm abilities that I'll get more into with her original fight's entry next week. So let's talk about the new aspects of the fight. Proof that Hornet was always holding back on us throughout the game, testing our abilities until she felt we were ready to face her at full strength. Here, she learns how to parry, which is incredibly dangerous in her Kingdom's Edge fight, as you can't shade dash through her. This is because you get the Shade Cloak from the Abyss, which is only accessible after defeating Hornet Sentinel, so you have to watch your movements and make sure you don't trigger her parry and stay safe. Her other main attack is her Spike Traps. She uses her thread to summon a series of balls in the arena which you have to hit away with your nail to dispel. If you allow these to build up, there can be up to 6 on screen at once, and they can be devastating, as she'll often leave them in locations you need to clear to avoid attacks. Combined with her faster movement speed, and you've got a fight that asks a lot of the player. But I have an issue with Hornet Sentinel that maybe it's just me, but both at Kingdom's Edge and in the Pantheons of Godhome, some of her attacks feel very hard to see. The arenas both have a grey and white tinge to them, with a lot of particle effects from the ashen wind that just obscures the spikes, and even Hornet and her threads to an extent. It's not a problem everyone will have, and it's not localized just to this boss. But for me, I wish that the colours of the attacks and the colours of the particles of wind and ash were just more distinct and contrasted. It'd make the fight a little easier to read, which is always a good thing in a 2D Metroidvania that is trying to put combat at the forefront. I love the story aspect of this fight, I love Hornet as a character, but when I think about her in a boss capacity, I always remember her first fight over her second. Next up on our list, we have a fan favourite, and the first boss that truly begins to hint at the nature of our main character and our true purpose. It's number 19, the Broken Vessel. Found at the depths of the ancient basin as you follow the wind westward, this husk is reanimated and controlled by the infection that swarms its body, and it's up to you to finish it off. Lore-wise, it's never explained how so many vessels, including the player character, were able to escape the abyss following the Pale King's sealing of the entrance, but many of us made it out, and you can find their corpses throughout Hallownest. The ones in the Nosk arena strung up, the one in Hornet's arena in Greenpath, but the Broken Vessel is perhaps the most important. I love this fight because it plays with the trope of two very equal beings in power, facing off against each other. You still have your autonomy as the player, but the Broken Vessel can perform dashes and slashes just like you, alongside a large amount of infectious attacks to win the fight. Its slash and aerial slash are the easiest moves to punish, as there's a very specific sound that accompanies the wind-up, so you can prepare to pogo at your leisure. Then there's the flail attack, where the vessel swings its nail in an arc to the left and right multiple times, easy to parry and punish with any long-reaching badges equipped. Where the Broken Vessel is most dangerous, and this also goes for his Dream variant, which we'll cover next week, is his jumping. The Broken Vessel homes in on you when he jumps, I swear to God, it's where I take most of my damage in this fight. He can just hop on top of you, it's very Crystal Guardian coded, I'll say that. He has a slam attack where at the apex of his jump, he'll plunge into the ground, releasing 4 infection blobs that spread out and rise up to hit the knight. And most dangerous, his Cascade ability, where he headbangs like he's at a heavy metal concert and fills the room with infection blobs. An incredibly tough attack to avoid, you just have to adapt, and if you can get some hits in, feel free. Sometimes the Broken Vessel will summon infection balloons that can also approach the knight, but die in 1 hit. I'm not a fan of this mechanic, either here or in the Lost Kin fight, but here it's more annoying because it's inconsistent. If you're going to be annoying, at least be consistently annoying, at least in my experience. Staggering the Broken Vessel is paramount to your survival, but this is a fight where, once you've got the rhythm down, it's very satisfying to complete hitless or close to hitless. A great fight that ends off a simple area and elevates the ancient basin. Happy holidays, viewers! I am trying to reach 20,000 subscribers on this channel by the summer of 2024, and I know we can do it. See how many of you guys aren't subscribed right now? We need to fix that. So be sure to parry that subscribe button to stay up to date on all of my future gaming content. Back to the video. We're headed back to the Godmaster DLC for this next pick as we take a look at the final bosses of the first Pantheon, number 18, Brothers Oro and Mato. Of course, we have a personal connection to the Nail Masters, as all 3 of them train us throughout the game, and I love that we finally get a chance to face off against them in battle. Oro and Mato have had a fractured relationship, with Oro initially starting the battle alone, just like he is in his hut at the Kingdom's Edge. Wielding his dash/slash ability, he attempts to take down the knight, and utilizes a moveset that may seem complicated, but is actually quite simple. His first attack is a double slash, where Oro will do 2 swipes that move him forwards towards the player. The range of this attack is surprisingly large, so if you want to shade dash through Oro to dodge it, you have to have perfect positioning due to his large hitbox. The easier attack to bait is his jump slash, where he'll jump into the air and then slam downwards. You can easily dash forwards so that when he lands, he's facing away from you, allowing for a series of free hits, and you need to punish this attack to win. And lastly, his dash slash. He'll jump to one side of the arena, begin charging up, and then release the attack. Jump over it, you'll be fine. Once defeated, Mato joins the fray, and this is actually quite sweet, because not only do we get to see Mato helping his brother, which Oro didn't expect, but we also have a personal connection to Mato, who views the knight as his own child. It's really sweet and familial, and makes this second phase more fun. Mato has the same moveset, except his nail art ability is his Cyclone Slash. He'll charge it up, begin spinning, and then raise up into the air in the direction of the knight, which is your opportunity to then dash underneath to avoid the attack. It takes some practice, but you will get there eventually. Lastly, the brothers can perform twin combo attacks of either the jump slash or the double slash, so just avoid accordingly. I think this fight is a perfect test for the early stages of Godhome, as it asks you to manage multiple enemies while giving very clear ways to avoid damage. Using spells such as the Shade Soul can hit both brothers when they're on ground level, giving that some use. I just think it's a fun time. It feels like what they wanted the Watcher Knights to be, if that makes any sense. I just prefer other fights on this list, but defeating the brothers and having them bow is satisfying every single time. The final warrior dream in today's video, and the second to last warrior dream in my rankings, it's time to ascend with number 17, Gorb the Greatmind. Gorb is a character, one that I feel is beloved in the community for his desire to ascend and his willingness to help you ascend through death. It's long been speculated that Gorb might be related to the Godseeker tribe in some way, as both seek to ascend, though the Godseekers wish to relate to their gods, while Gorb is just really smart. Whatever the case, found atop the Howling Cliffs, he's a pretty simple fight, and sometimes that's all I want. Gorb has a single attack he can use called Spearcast, which has him launch a ring of 8 spears outwards from his location. At full health, he launches 1 ring of spear, at 70% health, he launches 2 rings of spears, and at 40% health, he launches 3 rings of spears. When multiple spears are fired, they're released in alternating patterns. It's a very simple experience of dodging Gorb's attacks, getting hits in, dodging more spears, getting hits in, and eventually winning the day, while listening to Gorb's amazing rambling. The wiki says he has a second move, a directed spear, but I've personally never seen this attack. I'd love some clarification on whether that's correct or not. I can't really justify why I enjoyed Gorb so much beyond he's just got great vibes. But I do like the subtlety that Gorb's fight trains the player for an attack you'll later experience in the true final boss of the game, as Radiance uses a larger version of Gorb's spear cast ability in their fight. See, Gorb and his knowledge were trying to teach us all along. He's also genuinely difficult in his ascended version of his fight, where you have 3 platforms instead of 1 to dodge from, forcing you to play more carefully and only attack when you can guarantee damage. Overall, I just think he's neat, and I'm going to keep ascending with Gorb as we move on to our final boss of today's video. I suspect this is going to be another hot take, but at number 16, we have the Great Nail Sage Sly, boss of Pantheon 3 in the Godmaster DLC. I know that the popular opinion is that the Pantheon bosses are all amazing, iconic, fabulous, and can do no wrong, and I like Sly a lot. I love that we finally get to face the Nail Sage, and I'd say he's more deadly than his 3 pupils combined, with his jokingly small stature hiding a surprising amount of speed and precision. He's one of the few fights that actively uses the parry mechanic to allow the knight to get more free hits in. And just like brothers Oro and Mato, Sly has 2 very distinct attack combos that make up the majority of his kit, with his nail arts being used sparingly every now and then. His slash combo composes of 2 wide-reaching attacks, followed by a special spin attack that will always be launched in the air towards the knight's direction, giving you a chance to dodge towards where he was to avoid. His other combo is his nail slam, where Sly jumps into the air, slams down with the nail, and then often follows up with an extra slash attack. I find if you've got a long-reaching charm or quick slash, you can tank some of Sly's hits to stagger him before he can do too much damage, especially once you understand his moveset. But you have to be wary of his nail arts. His dash slash and cyclone slash function similarly to that of Oro and Mato, so you should already know how to avoid them, but his cyclone slash has a bit more floatiness to it. You can try pogoing him during it for some cheeky damage if you want, but I always took hits trying this. It's his great slash that's the most dangerous, however, as he's wielding the Nail Master's Glory Charm, so he can power up his nail arts exceptionally fast, and if that great slash hits you, it does 2 masks of damage, absolutely brutal and tough to react to. So if you see that charging animation and you're close to him, shadow dash through him and pray. Once he's taken enough damage, his second phase is a little easier. He'll bounce around the room in a frenzy, and once he appears close enough to the knight, becomes a spinning Beyblade of death that you need to dash away from, turn around, and strike him before he flies off. This can be tough due to his large attack hitbox and your potential reach, so my advice: charge up a great slash and use its extended reach to hit Sly right as he's about to fly off. Once you understand how this attack functions, you can counter it relatively easily, but it takes practice to learn, which I really enjoy. I think Sly nails the Nail Sage style of combat in a way that I think is really entertaining, and I totally get people who have him in their top 5, or even top 3, or even as their favorite boss. I just vibe with other bosses more, but I think Sly will continue to rise in my rankings as I play more Godmaster. Check back next year, maybe you'll be in my top 10. And that's my part 2 complete. We've ranked a lot of bosses and only 15 remain. Are there any surprise bosses that haven't been mentioned yet? Let me know down below, and parry that subscribe button so you can tune in next week as I reveal my favorite 15 bosses in Hollow Knight. My socials are on screen now, feel free to follow where you feel comfortable. I recommend my Twitter, my Blue Sky, or my Discord, whatever you're comfortable with. A massive shout out to my patrons over on Patreon for supporting me for another month, thank you so much, and I'll see you guys next time. Adios.